Um, so I want to give a little bit of background on how we got to this. I went to a Montgomery County Villages meeting organized by Pasit Aviv, who many of you know. And afterward, I was talking to Teresa Anderson, is it?
Anderson, right.
Right. At King Farm Neighbors Village. And I don't know how we got onto the topic of surveys, but she had said that she had just recently done one. And it occurred to us, how important it would be for other villages to have an opportunity to talk about this. People sometimes associate surveys only at the startup phase of a village. The smart ones think of it when they're experiencing growing pains or just to take the pulse of their community. And so I immediately fingered her and I said, well, it sounds like because you had just recently done one and you had also done one at the beginning. And she very graciously volunteered Jim to be our speaker today, who had led their effort. And Jim's last name is Grueff. And he was the one who has been leading this effort for King Farm, a neighborhood village. So we're really very happy to have you here, Jim. And just to remind people, you're not going to be talked at, after Jim sets some context. This is for you to ask questions. If some of you have done surveys before and you want to chime in with your own experiences, we call this a facilitated discussion. And we're very glad to have Jim give us the context and be sort of our expert for the day, but to help draw all of you out as well. So take it away, Jim.
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here with you all. As Mary Jo said, I'm from the King Farm Neighbors Village. I'm on the board of directors. Until about a year ago, I was the president of the village for about 3.5 years and was replaced by Teresa Anderson in April of last year. But in my role as director of a member of the board of directors, I also volunteered to be the team leader for our ad hoc survey team, we called it last fall. We have done now, as Mary Jo mentioned, 2 surveys. We did the first one in May of 2017. And the essential purpose of that was to determine whether there was enough interest in King Farm that we should go ahead and try to develop an aging in place village. And then the second one, which we did last fall, was now we're, depending on how you define it, 3 or 4 years into our operational phase. We need to find out what our members think of what we've been doing, what their ideas might be, because we really had not had an opportunity once we were underway to get feedback. Our only feedback really was to have an activity or an event or offer a service and see how many showed up or how many asked for the service. That was our only metric for trying to figure out if we were on the right track or not. Let me just ask you, are any of you, do you feel that your village is in the formative startup phase right now, or are you all more developed? Everybody's, yeah, okay. I will talk a little bit about our first, I think it still is instructive. So it might seem daunting if you haven't done a survey to do one. What we did was for this last one, our second one, was we created a team of 5 people, all of us board members. That tends to be the way we roll. We actually need some more support beyond our board. And then we, very fortunately for us in King Farm, we have a member, Mary Ott, who really enjoys working with survey software. So if you can find somebody like this, then please don't let them go. So Mary was part of our team. She recommended to us that we use Google Forms, so we did that because none of the rest of us really understood the software. And then we decided, this is an opportunity, probably we're not going to be doing this very often. How do we want to use it? So we looked at our activities, our previous events, the services that we provided. By the way, we were providing transportation and a few other services until COVID hit, but we didn't for a couple of years, and we've just resumed them, partly based on what we learned through this survey. We resumed this month, May 1st, with our services. So we asked about, for example, in the show, by the way, no need to take notes, copious or otherwise. I'm going to, before we're finished, I'm going to give you my email. And I can send you the actual questionnaire, the survey questionnaire we used last fall, and then the report on the responses that we put together based on the results from the responses from the survey. So that will be available to all of you. So we ask about the services that we have been providing, even though we stopped at COVID. And we gave them six options. And surprising to us was that the strongest response was for what we call simple household tasks, which we actually had not been offering in the period before COVID. And then secondly, not surprising, second was transportation and medical appointments and grocery shopping. So based largely on that, we included simple household tasks. This would be things like non-professional, not needing a lot of expertise, moving a heavy object within a house, having to climb a ladder to change a light bulb, picking up mail, things like that. So we are now offering that. And as I said, that was the first item among the responses for services. We also ask about clubs. We have a movie club and a book club, and we have a monthly what we call coffee and conversation. And then we also have what we call our monthly featured event that's either social or it's educational. And the responses for the evening events, educational or social work, were quite strong, which was mostly confirming for us. We've had speakers such as speakers on elder law, medical marijuana, and so on. Our social events include wine and cheese events. That was when we were doing things in person. In fact, we just did one last week because we're now back to doing in-person events. Our clubs and our coffees, we found that over the last couple of years that we have a small but very consistent group of people who participate in these, and the responses basically confirm that. The responses for the clubs and for the monthly coffees were weaker responses, less response than for the evening events. So those basically confirm what we had been seeing in terms of the numbers. This was our first opportunity to ask our members, and by the way, this was directed at our existing membership, which at the time last fall was about 110 or so, 105, 110, and we got 45 responses for members. So we thought that was a good response rate in terms of our membership. We also have I can tell you more about this, but we have a longer email list of people who have expressed interest at any point, more than 200. And we also sent the survey to them. But we had the first question was, are you a member or not? And then we would know that if we were dealing with somebody that was already a member or they weren't. So we asked about, do you have new ideas? Do you have suggestions for activities that we haven't thought of, that we haven't made available to you, or services that we haven't offered, that we haven't provided? Any ideas for other things that we should be doing? And we got a wide variety of responses, as you would guess, some not very practical, but others interesting, things we hadn't thought of, and probably practical enough that we could try to implement them. One important thing that it allowed us to do was we were anticipating that we would be coming out of COVID. So we said, would you like to stay with Zoom only? Would you like to go to in-person only? About 2/3 of our members who responded said they'd like a mix, combination of in-person and online Zoom. That has some practical challenges to it, but we might be able to work with that. Only 14% of the members who responded to this said they wanted to stay with only Zoom. So that has informed us. For example, as I said last week, we did an in-person event for the first time in more than 2 years. That most of our membership is looking to go in that direction. Another thing that was helpful for us was asking them, how do they get their information about our village? We actually have 5 platforms, so to speak, 5 ways of getting information. It told us what we had guessed was the case, where we have two different email systems where they can get information. And we have a monthly newspaper just for King Farm, and we always have a column in there. Those were the ones that people were using. Relatively very few were using our website. Relatively very few were using our Facebook page. So that's information for us going forward. We ended with an open-ended question because we've never had this opportunity before. Do you have any other feedback for the board of directors? Just anything you want to say to us. And it was a wide variety of responses and provide some insights. I'll read you just a couple. One was, I think the village board is doing just an awesome job. So we like that. That was good reinforcement. Here's another one. I wasn't interested in any of the Zoom meeting topics. They all seemed aimed at little old ladies. So I'm not sure what we're going to do with that, but good to hear that somebody is thinking that way. In the report, which, as I said, will be available to you, we, the survey team, a subset of the board, basically put together 11 recommendations to the board for priority follow-up. So we were very specific. Now that we have these results and these people have responded, this is what we should be focusing on in terms of follow-up and going forward. So that was the survey from last fall and the report that we now have on it. Just a little bit on the first survey. That one was, as I mentioned, we were just starting and we thought we need some basis. We need some data to determine whether this is worth the effort that we're going to put into this. The key statistic, there were many of them, but was that of the responses from households where at least one member was 55 years or older, 2/3 of them said they wanted to remain in their King Farm residences as they age. So we found that to be very encouraging. And I'll read to you just a couple of paragraphs from our summary and key findings because it really captures what we were trying to do in the first one. The King Farm Neighbors Village Survey paints a picture of a community whose residents would like to age in place, but where most residents are not yet in need of volunteer services. The responses demonstrate interest in an aging in place village, particularly among respondents from households with members age 55 and up. Respondents are interested both in access to services and in participating as a volunteer. That was something we found in both the original survey and the one from last fall. A lot of interest in volunteering. King Farm residents who responded to the survey largely intend to remain in their residences as they age, particularly those living in condominiums. And then finally, the findings suggest the moment is very timely for organizing a village for King Farm. At this point in time, there exists a potential cadre of volunteers and demands for services should be manageable. A village started in the near term would mature as the community ages and would be best positioned to meet growing needs. So in other words, we may not have a lot of demand at the beginning. We think we have enough volunteers to handle it, but we expect that over time that demand will increase. What we couldn't anticipate, of course, was essentially missing 2 years due to COVID, which we never would have imagined would be the case. So, but overall, we found the first one basically essential for us to get underway. And the second one has been very useful. And as I think I've alluded to, we've already acted on in a number of ways in terms of the results. So that's a quick overview, and be ready for any questions or discussion that you want to have.
Yes, I have a question, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
This is Sylvia Saunders.
Okay.
You mentioned that the people that you surveyed had very little interest in your website. They were more interested in your, I think you said your newsletters and
emails.
Yeah, emails. Why
Right.
do you think they weren't interested in the website? I'm in the process trying to find someone to build one for us.
Right.
Well,
The website, I don't want to be misleading about this. The website is useful in a number of ways. We use it for now to get requests in and to hook up people asking for services with the volunteers, and a number of other ways. We keep our documents on the website and so on. But what we found in the responses was, for example, some people saying, we didn't know you had a website. Other people said, I don't know how to find the website. So we have not created a good awareness of that we have our own website. There's some confusion in our community because we're called King Farm Neighbors Village. The HOA is called King Farm Citizens Assembly. And we could tell by the responses, a number of people couldn't make the distinction. They didn't understand that there was a difference. We're standalone, but we're supported by the HOA. But we do our own thing, and Citizens Assembly does their own thing. So they were thinking, well, I've been on the they said, I've been on the Citizens Assembly website and I can't find you. They didn't understand that we have our own. So we need to do a better job of making it clear to them that there's a lot of information on there, including our events for the month and so on.
Jim, could I
How
just
did you
ask a follow-up
survey?
question? It gets to your question, but very quickly on the very last point that you made. Does the HOA prominently provide a link to your website?
Yes, you can go on their website, whether it's prominent or not. If you're looking for it, you probably can find it. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Sylvia, go ahead.
I forgot the question.
Somebody else?
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, I know what I was going to ask.
Okay.
How did you send out your surveys? You
Yeah,
didn't
good
use
question.
the website, you used emails?
You're
that it?
right. Yeah, because we
Ah.
have the emails of all of our members. So we send it out that way. And then we have that longer list that I mentioned, and we welcome them, non-members, about half the list are non-members, to respond also if they wanted to. So emails with the primary way, but then in the edition, the monthly edition of the newspaper, before we released the survey, we said, this is important to us. You're going to have a chance to respond to this survey. And if you don't get an email about it, contact us and we will send you the survey. We did make it possible to respond hard copy, but first time around, we had very, very few responses hard copy. We had a few, so we didn't really emphasize that. But if somebody wanted it hard copy, they could do it. We could get it to them.
I think I saw Seal first and then you, Kate. Seal, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I'm about to lose battery power here, so I'm not sure.
Okay, go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, hold on a second.
No,
Let the other person ask their question. I'll be with you in a
Okay, Kate.
second.
go for it.
So I had two questions. The quick one is, what platform do you all use with your website? Is that a Club Express or is that something else?
No, it's not Club Express. You know, I'm not the webmaster. I don't know if you go, it's kfnv.org is the website. So
Okay.
if you go take a look at it, maybe you can tell. We have an
Okay.
excellent webmaster.
And then another question I had is, and you may have said this, but how many participants received the survey and how many results came back with an answered survey?
Yeah, okay, so we, at the time, our membership was, I would say, was about 105, and we had 45 respondents that were members. And our overall response was about 66. So non-members, probably all from that other list. For example, the other list includes people who had come to an event and filled out a form that they were interested, but didn't sign up to be members. So I guess what I mentioned, we were pleased because we were almost 50% of our membership responded to the survey. So that should give us a good feel.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, what are your dues? And let me just ask, what are your dues for a full member?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. That's when I was president, the only really contentious issue we had on the board was whether we should charge dues or not. And we had a split vote, very rare for us, and we decided not to have dues. We have suggested donations. Now, our situation may be close to unique in that our HOA is very generous in their support. And with their support, we've been comfortable. And this is not, I know, not the case with many villages. So in our history, they've been very supportive. That could change, obviously, with a different board of trustees for the HOA. And now I'm trying to urge my fellow board members to be a little more, to think more in terms of fundraising and fundraising events and so on, because we don't know for sure that it will always be that way. But the decision at the time was we're not going to charge dues. I know from, for example, talking to Kentlands Village at one point, that they were thinking of converting from no dues to dues, and they were anticipating that there would be resistance, which I would expect, actually, if you're used to no dues. But anyway, the answer is we don't have dues. We have suggested donations.
Seal, are you plugged in now?
Yeah, I'm fine. So Jim, you talked about the fact that there's the HOA and that people may have had some trouble making the distinction between the HOA and the village. Do you feel like how confident are you that they were really, when they say great board or whatever, that they're really answering to your board and not the, just in general, are you comfortable with the validity of the answers?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, but I think most of the respondents were village members. They had filled out the application to become members. And then the
Okay.
others, I think we could tell that they were aware for the most part. There were a few where we could tell that they were confused, but generally we felt it was valid. And in many cases, it confirmed what we had seen in terms of people showing up for events and so on.
Mm.
So we feel pretty comfortable with it.
I think Cheryl was next and then Gail.
Okay.
Yeah. Jim, I'm with the Village in Howard, and we're in Howard County, Maryland, and I can
Mhm.
identify with the people think that we're part of the quote villages, which are in Florida and all over the
Yeah.
place. Actually, and Columbia is composed of individual villages, but we're an organization, you know. Anyway, one of the things on our survey from last fall was, how did you learn about the Village in Howard? In your survey, did you, you know, ask any of that kind of question? How do people learn about the King Farm neighbor village?
We didn't ask it quite that way, but as I mentioned, we asked, how do you get your information about the village? And somebody could, well, for example, if they looked at which many don't, of course, but at our newspaper that's just for King Farm, the monthly newspaper, we always have something in there. So if they were interested, there's always information in there about how to contact us, both by email or go onto our website. We didn't ask it that way, and how did you first hear about us? But I think we did in the original one. I think we did that, and we found that word of mouth was an important way for doing that. But because we have these platforms that we've had for a while now, we wanted to see how they would respond to the use of the platforms.
Right.
Okay.
Do you have a feel for the average age of your villagers or your members?
Yes, especially from the first one. And it's an older community. We're maybe somewhat unusual in that we have, originally they were separate houses, detached houses, and there are many families, many children in those families. Since then, they're mostly townhouses and condominiums where children are not usually residing in those. So I would say it's not a senior community for sure, because we have across the board. Also, we have apartments in King Farm. I didn't mention this, but we have 3,200 households in King Farm, but about 1,000 of those are apartments, which we consider are probably mostly transient residents and not really part of our base, so to speak, that we would expect to be interested in aging in place. But if you look at demographics across the board, we would be older than an average community for sure. We would have more seniors than you might expect, but we do have the younger component as well. One of our challenges as a village is younger members for sure. We like the idea of intergenerational, but we haven't been able to do it so far, actually.
Yeah, we're in
I
the
have a follow-up to that if I could. I believe a friend of mine told me that she and her husband were considering sort of a continuing care community out in King Farm. Do you have a continuing care, independent living, assisted living?
Yeah, we have a very nice one called Ingleside.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, right.
That's in King Farm. That's an interesting issue for us because just recently we've had some Ingleside residents who want to be volunteers with us and so on. And they can request services from us, but that was a little bit of a difficult question because we are generously supported by our homeowners association. We pay HOA dues. The residents of King Farm or Ingleside King Farm do not pay HOA dues. They pay a lot of money to Ingleside, obviously, because it's a very fine place. But we decided that if they wanted to help as volunteers, if they want to ask for services, that we will consider them King Farm residents for that purpose.
Thank you. Okay, Gail, I think you've been patiently waiting.
Yeah, I'm going to say that 50% is a really good response rate. Now, my question too is that what happens frequently is there's the issue of a household when you have two people in a household, did you try to ask individuals? Because it does get very complicated when you're looking at, when you send a survey out to people and you have multiple households. I mean, multiple people in a household.
Right.
That it's hard to control for. I mean, you can do it by tracking, but that's.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question. For one thing, as I mentioned, we don't have dues, so that made it simpler in terms of dues. Are you paying as a single or as a household, and so on? How many people should be included in a household, and so on. But in terms of the way we operate is each person, not household, person should fill out a membership application. So, for example, my wife and I each have our separate membership. So when somebody's responding, we know by their email basically that this is a member. We don't necessarily know if they're living with another member or they're not. And we didn't try to adjust for that. We just took it as a member's opinion on these various things.
Yeah, because sometimes I know I'm with Arlington Neighborhood Village, but sometimes when you do these surveys, if you have a household membership, it gets very complicated in terms of actual numbers and.
Yeah.
But there's ways to handle it.
Yeah, well, and that's because we decided at the beginning that membership would be on a per person basis, not per household. We take each person as a separate member and we took their responses accordingly.
Seal, did you have another question?
It wasn't really a question, it was a comment as a follow-on to Gail. We just completed a member survey about 6 weeks ago. The fielding ended about 6-8 weeks ago, and we have our big debriefing with the survey company this week, in fact. And we did, we were so eager to hear from each member of a household membership and gave them, you know, everybody had to have their unique email address and they had their unique member number so we could track it. But when it came down to it, and we were, our committee members were doing follow-up calls to the non-responders, invariably because there were a lot of non-responders at first, we ended up treating as priority those who had not responded from that household. I mean, we were just so determined, you know, because each member is each member, but we know that a lot of people answered, and it was not a short survey. It was, you know, 25 plus questions. So we knew that there was still some answering for the household type stuff going on.
How did that work when you went back to try to find those who? How did that work? You were trying to find members who had not responded?
Right. So we at the end we had about a 50% response rate, which I was hoping it would be higher. Actually, I do know in just a cold survey, a 50% response rate is pretty good, but because we have so many involved members and we do charge a membership fee, and we have lots of longtime members, for all that, for all those reasons, I had hoped that it would be a higher response rate. But anyway, when we looked at who we hadn't heard from yet, inevitably we had to treat as priority those who had not responded from a household. You know, just because we couldn't call everybody.
Yeah.
And we'd already reached out so many times to each person that we decided we would focus our efforts on people who we had not heard from at all, and less so on the spouse of the person, because we knew that we were hearing from people. Yeah, my wife answered. We went over it and we did it together. And you can't just say, I don't want you to do it together. You get back on the computer and you do your own. You know, we just had to kind of come to terms with what the reality was, whether we wanted it to be that way or not.
Yeah.
Gail?
Another thing that's really good with member surveys is there's a certain population that will, even if they have emails, they're not comfortable with using email. So another option is to have somebody interview them. It sounds like what Seal did. So you can get the people who aren't comfortable with the technology or not willing to use it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then how do you, for people that weren't on email or on email often, how do we get the word to them that we're even doing a survey? And
Well, it's hard if you don't, I mean, if you have a list of, if you have a list of members that you know aren't on the, don't use email or online, those list of members could be called separately and somebody else fills out the survey. But if you're just trying to get to members you don't know if they use email or not, that's more difficult. But if you have a list of people who usually either are mailed, emailed, or just people know that they don't use it, you can set up phone interviews with.
right, I think we have a relatively few of those, and I think our member coordinator did make some calls and offered to bring over a hard copy of the survey for them.
We ended up, we know exactly who doesn't use emails, and we had to send out, a printed copy to those 22 people. And again, that had their dedicated member number on it. And it with a self-addressed envelope, making it as easy as possible, of course, and the survey responses went to the survey company, not to our office. Because you're right, there are those who aren't going to do it online, and there are those who don't have the capacity to do it online. Only in a few cases, I think 4 or 5, did we have to do literally sitting down with someone and helping them fill it out. But it all takes time. It really does.
Well, and those people are especially interesting because they're likely to be the biggest users of our services. So we
Yes.
definitely want to reach them.
Right. I think Kate was next.
Yeah, I didn't know between Jim and Sounds Like Sal, is there an average size length of a survey that anyone sort of hit as the sweet spot? Multiple surveys with few questions, or one survey with a lot of questions?
Yeah, that's an important question. Our premise was that the more questions you have, the less likely someone is to pick it up and actually answer respond to
Absolutely.
the survey. Our first one was, I believe, 11 questions, and our most recent one, I think, was 10 or 11, though there are several sub-questions. Last fall survey, you'll see if you get it. But our premise was be able to tell them that it's not going to be more than 10 or 11 questions, and so that they won't just decide they don't want to spend the time on it.
Carolyn?
You had asked somebody else about that too, I think.
Yeah, Sal, did you find 10 and 11, did you have around that money, or you had more in the 20s? Sounds like.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
We did have more. We had about 25. And what we did, we knew it was a longer survey, and that was after trimming. But we had 5 areas of questions and had about 5 questions underneath each area. And we did try to prime the pump for about 2 or 3 months prior to the fielding of the survey, just to say, because we had an opportunity, because a company had offered pro bono services, a professional surveying company had offered their services. So we made kind of a big hoop-de-doo about saying this is an opportunity that we normally don't have to get a real, professional survey and analysis done. And, we tried to prime the pump, isn't the right really term, but to really frame it as a great opportunity now that we're hopefully coming out of COVID, and but we heard it was too long of a survey.
Yeah,
Even though
Vanessa,
we told them how much time to expect it to take, between 12 and 15 minutes, we heard loud and clear it was too long of a survey.
yeah, Vanessa made the point that you can talk about time, like you just said. So We didn't, I don't believe, talk about time or even the questions. I think we called it a brief survey and a rare opportunity to hear from our members, something like that. So,
Yeah.
Okay, Gail?
But I mean, it really depends on what you need. Because you want to make sure every single question in there is absolutely needed. And if people know what's going on, and you make it very simple, then people are willing to go a little bit longer. I mean, I would say 10 to 15 minutes is sort of a max. But again, what SEAL did is telling people in advance what's important. And also to have skip patterns in the survey if something's not relevant to them.
You're right. And so our associate members had a far shorter survey. Our full members, the people who probably are less likely to spend more time, are the ones who had the longer survey. I don't know what else to say.
Right. I think Carolyn was next, and then back to Cheryl.
Thank you. I'm curious, both Jim and Seal, how your actual questions were developed. We typically develop them ourselves when we do our surveys. And Seal, you said you used a survey company. So I'm wondering, did they have input into it? And Jim, did your 5-member team pretty much put together the questions for the survey?
well, in our case, we started out with, I myself did about a 1-page outline of what I thought we needed to include for this opportunity. And then the 5 of us just kept working on it. And as somebody just said, some of what I put in there, we took out because it just wasn't really essential. And we added some things that I hadn't thought of. We just kept working it. And we were very careful on the language, the way we worded the questions and so on. But we did it on our own. And I think we just tried to use as plain English as we could and go with that.
Right.
Cheryl, I think you were next, and then Gail.
Yeah, I had some comments based on our annual survey that we did last fall. We had 18 questions, and question number 18 was more of a comment thing about what we could do to improve the village. But we asked them things like, how did you hear about us? What interested you in joining us? Their age range, demographics, things like that. And we asked them about navigating our website, also things about our various activities that we have, to rate them. Do we want to increase our programming to weekends? We do have some weekend programming. Rate our newsletter. How did the computer help you, especially during the pandemic? And we also did wellness calls to our members during the pandemic. But a lot of this was geared towards getting us back in person and trying to hold on to our membership, because we are primarily member-based. We do charge fees. We have 2 levels of membership, and then we actually have a 3rd. We have associates for individuals and couples, and also full for individuals and couples. We give them a slightly reduced rate when they're a couple. It's $116 over the individual rate, so it's not double. The associates get all activities. The full members get activities plus services, and that means things like what Jim was talking about before, where someone can come to their home and maybe give them a ride to a medical appointment or do light maintenance around their house. And we also have what we call a circle of care, where if they are hospitalized, been in an accident, have a serious illness, whatever, we can help them, not replacing nursing care, but we can help them get through a certain period of time in their recovery. So, we do a lot of things. And we also we spread the word by our website, our newsletter, our Facebook page. We use Nextdoor and Patch. We try and get some of the local media involved, because our membership dues pay about 40% of our expenses. So we rely on the kindness of strangers, if you will, for grants and sponsorships. And we're trying to, develop some of those opportunities. So, but yeah, it was a good survey. Most of them are happy. So that's all I have to say.
By the way, I told you wrong on the second survey. The first one was 10 or 11 questions. The second one was 18 questions, actually longer than I remembered.
Gail, go ahead, and then I wanted to make a question to several of you afterward. Gail, go ahead.
There's the Village to Village has a website. And on the website, there's some sample surveys, which if people want to look at, or samples from other villages that have used it. And another resource is just to look at a few other questionnaires and see how it's worded, whether some real questionnaire basics, whether it's, 1 is positive, 5 is negative, and how you do it, just looking at some basic surveys online is really helpful too, to know what some of the standards are.
We haven't heard from Vanessa. Vanessa, has Silver Spring done a survey at all recently, or one at the beginning and another one more recently? What's your experience?
So we do an annual survey. Unlike what many of you are talking about, we're fortunate in that we have a board member who actually did this as a professional. So she does it for us pro bono. But we do an annual membership survey, and we also do every 2 years we do a volunteer survey. And that one we just completed recently. I guess we did that one January through February. So that one we just did. But really most of what we do is similar to what everybody else has been saying. The reason I wrote what I did about time is because our volunteer survey, which I could probably find, had over 20, we didn't have 30 questions, but we had over 20 questions. But the woman who developed it, this person who did it as a professional, made sure that it was what can be finished within 10 minutes. And because she does a lot of skips in there, and that's part of it. She uses SurveyMonkey. Is what she uses.
That's what we did for our first one. Yeah.
I just want to say that I looked at Silver Spring Village's survey. I looked at a lot of surveys before we, when we were putting together ours. It was I really liked their survey. I really liked it. Doug shared it last summer. I had plenty of time to steal from it at that point. We knew that ours was coming up. And it did factor into some of the questions that we asked.
The other thing that I do want to say, and I think Steele, you were the one who mentioned it, or somebody else, we always do follow-up phone calls. I'm the director of volunteer services, so I'm more familiar with the volunteer survey than the membership survey. But I remember the first time we did it, which was literally, we completed it right before the pandemic. We got our report in March 2020, that very rememberable, or whatever the word is, date. And we sort of joked afterwards because we were like, well, how much did we do? And we realized that one of the things we got from that is we wanted to build teams, and we started a volunteer gathering. It was every week during the pandemic, and then it went to every other week, and now it's still going on once a month. The idea being to build community for our volunteers. But I remember the woman who developed our survey making a comment that you need to offer something. You have to offer incentive, and my committee was very, very adamant that they weren't going to do that, and they did follow-up phone calls, and the amount of responses, because those follow-up phone calls doubled and more. And in fact, the membership committee also, they do follow-up phone calls with the membership. That's where you deal with the problem of having to fill up, somebody fill it out for you. The call is not only, did you get it? Can we send you another one? But it's also, can we help you fill it out? So it's because of those follow-up phone calls I think we were like at 60 or 70% for the volunteer survey this year, but mostly but large part of that is due to the phone calls.
I have a request and a question for several of you. So I have heard that in addition to Jim, Cheryl, Howard County has done one recently. Carolyn, Lowlink has done one. Seal, you've done one. Silver Spring, you do one annually. So the request first is that you send me copies of your surveys, if you don't mind, because Gil, you mentioned B2B, but that's one of the functions of our new website is that we will have a resources tab and we will post surveys. So please do send them to me so that we can get them up on our website. And I guess I would like each of you who has done a survey within the past year, this is a thought question, this is your final essay exam. What do you think were the one or two most important takeaways? And maybe one of them is, what really blew you away that you didn't expect to hear it? So whatever it is, what were the one or two most significant things that you got out of your surveys? Maybe we'll take Jim first, just because he's our presenter, and then I'll call on the rest of you at random.
Well, one I mentioned was we gave them 6 choices for activities, and the one that we had not been providing because we thought there would be liability issues and other things, maybe what we call simple household tasks got the best response. And as a result of that, we're now offering that. We didn't, obviously the first time around, we didn't anticipate that at all. This time we didn't really, we just put it in there because we thought we could do it. And that got the best response. The other thing, I'm not sure this is quite what you're asking, Mary Jo, but it's interesting for us is we asked the open-ended, well, not an open-ended question. Do you have ideas for an event or a presentation that you could do because you have some type of expertise? And a lot of people responded with their emails, with their contact info. And I was talking to the chairperson of our events committee, and it's clear that she's working down that list. So she's going to follow up with people who
That's
say they can
great.
do something
Great
interesting
idea.
in the village.
Excellent. I'll just make a follow-up comment to that, which is that in the village that I started, and then I helped it merge with another, our way of working was always to view ourselves as catalysts and facilitators for other people to identify a passion, an interest, a skill that they wanted. And then we would help them do it and make it as painless as possible for them to then take the lead on doing it. So maybe Cheryl, you next, something that really surprised you and or the greatest takeaway.
The first question we asked on our survey was, how did you learn about us? And I was very surprised that 51% of our respondents said a friend, word of mouth. Our second category was 30%, and that was newspaper, internet, informational talk. But the fact that they heard by word of mouth, I'm the communication and outreach chair for the village. So I do presentations in, 50+ centers and libraries and all over the place, wherever I can, get my foot in the door. And it's kind of interesting. It almost makes me feel like, well, why are we doing these presentations if people are hearing about us from friends? But, every little bit helps. So that's the thing that really surprised me.
Okay. Carolyn, you want to go next?
We do 2 surveys every year, one for our volunteers and one for our members. And in addition to the typical questions that we ask we ask people to rate various aspects, we ask some open-ended questions at the end of the survey. And particularly, we use one question that just asks people to reflect on their either volunteer or member experience over the past year. And that has resulted in some not only very fine testimonials about what membership or volunteering means to them, but also some good ideas for going forward for the next year. So I think it's important to have the open-ended questions at the end of the survey.
Seal, you want to go next?
I'm afraid I'm going to sound much smarter in 4 days than I do now because we have a 4-hour debrief with the consultant on Thursday morning. I do not know the findings.
Okay, good enough, good enough. How about you, Vanessa?
So off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything that was like blew us out of the water. I guess for me, the biggest takeaway is how well we know ourselves. And that really, you know, we want, as I say that though, we wanted answers that we didn't get, i.e. one of our questions, and I'm not referring to the membership one now because I'm not as familiar with that one. I'm referring to the volunteer one. But one of the questions that I really wanted was answered was, how do you sign up? Like, how do you learn about the volunteer opportunities? And it was even, like there was nobody who said, this is what you should be doing more of. So in some ways that was sort of the opposite of a, hey, that's really wonderful. But I guess the feeling that we know what we're doing and we know ourselves, at least in terms of the volunteers. The members might be different. And I guess also to continue along with that is to continue doing what we're doing and work with our people. I like what, blanking on who it was who just said that, well, Carolyn just said, we also use a lot of open-ended questions. And we also, one of them, as Jim said, was, you know, would somebody be willing to lead one of our volunteer gatherings? And in fact, somebody did say he would, and he did one a couple months ago, and it was probably one of the best ones we've had, probably because I didn't have to talk so much. But I'm not just talking about me. Everyone really thought that it went really well. So allowing people the ability to have their say, I think, is so important.
Go ahead, yes.
For Arlington Neighborhood Village, we're going to do both, I believe, volunteer and member survey in the fall. But what we had been doing them every year, every other year, and we had carried over questions from year to year to see if we could track some of the opinion questions. So that's really good, and we'll, for the next year, you know, we'll probably do that, but we haven't done the survey during the pandemic, except to find out how we were doing during the pandemic. But I don't remember any of the results.
Great.
I like to say we do not do one every year. It probably is best practices to do that, but we don't. Despite our best efforts to do all the things that we should do, we just end up not doing a member survey every single year. It ends up being about every 2 or 3 years. And so our hope with this one was that people would be willing to spend a little more time with it, since we hadn't asked them in some time. We were just so busy during COVID, and things were changing so quickly that it just didn't happen.
Yeah, we didn't do it every year. We did it for a while, and we haven't done it for a few years, because then you get, you know, overlap of, you know, it's close to the last time, but so we haven't. I don't want to say that we've done it every year, but for a while we were doing it every year or every year and a half, and it's been a few years since A&V has done it.
I want to ask Kate and Sylvia, what you've taken away from this. Are you on the verge of starting a survey, and does this give you a lot to chew on? Which I'm sure the answer is yes there, or does it scare you away? What are your plans for surveys in the future, and what have you taken away from this?
So yeah, we haven't done one since I've been with Bradley Hills Village. It's come up in conversation. It feels overwhelming that, and this is helpful to hear, that King Farm did a group of 5 people, a team around a team or pulling a team together is helpful to come up with questions. And I think the length of a survey is helpful, a takeaway, because not having done one since I've been with the group, you know, I can probably make 50 questions and send it out there. And I know it wouldn't be received very well. I think, you know, I mean, I guess one question I had for Vanessa was, do you guys think you use the same survey every year? Do you feel like you tweak it or you revamp the whole thing? Like being pretty fluid on what's going on in your village?
Well, again, I'm more familiar with the volunteer one than the membership, though, as I say that it's the same person who develops both.
Right.
And we tweak it. You know, she for this year versus 2 years ago, you know, she sent us a copy of what she had done. We talked about it. We also looked at what we want to do, and something that you said earlier, Kate, though she basically develops it, we also run it by our volunteer committee, which this year is all 4 people and me. So it's like what Jim said, it's 5 people, and we sort of sit and read it. She also tests it. But we do tweak it. We do go with what's going on that particular year and what do we want mostly to find out. Does that help? I don't know if that's helpful or not.
No, it is helpful. And I think the last time we did it as a village, I wasn't part of it, but I think they actually went door to door and really used, I think, Jim, you asked a great question at the beginning, are you a startup village? And I think when we were a startup village, it was really door to door, face to face, really getting to know what people thought about what a village was and educating them, as well as fleshing out what they're interested in. And I think, I don't know, the takeaway is just good food for thought as we imagine moving forward, maybe later on this year, maybe early next year. So I came just to get a little bit more information from you all, because it's something that our board has in every board meeting, like, we should ask our membership. So it's nice to get feedback.
And what I want to say too is that although we may use some of the questions, the issues change. You might not need, if you've been going for a few years and you can get, you know, how many rides you give or whatever, you might not need those questions anymore. So it's really important to see what you need and what you need for policy and long-term planning and things like that as the questions to put in. Because you might already have the answer that you've had that you needed the questions for previously. You might have enough database, enough years that you don't need that anymore. So you look at it and you see what you need now and what you may need in the future, in the short-term future of planning and everything else.
I want to give Sylvia, she was going to make a comment earlier.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. I did one survey.
And what is your village? I'm sorry, I missed that at the beginning.
Oh, I'm sorry. East County Village Seniors. We're a small village in the eastern part of Montgomery County.
Good.
And when we first when we were first established, I did a survey to find out what talents or expertise the members could contribute, because we are and were and still are an all volunteer village. Everything that we did, all the classes that we had brought to the village for the members were free classes, you know, sponsored by Holy Cross and by the county. So I wanted to know what talents or what skills, you know, the members had so that they could teach or let's say trade with other members, you know, so that they could head up their own committees for whatever they wanted to do. So that was okay. They had a very interesting list of skills that they wanted to contribute. But now, since the pandemic, of course, we haven't seen anyone. And then now I'm thinking about doing another survey. But I'm going to have some of the members to work with me on the survey because I've gotten a lot of good suggestions from Jim and everyone else about the different types. And I would like to say that the first one I did, it was a nice short one, I think with maybe 10 questions or less or something like that. And they had to do a lot of writing. They weren't specific questions, you know, so they could say yes or no. They had to write down whatever they were interested in doing and what they would like to do. So now I'm thinking about doing something, maybe, I don't know how many questions, but I think 10 or 12 sounds good. Because what I'm trying to do now is to bring people back into the organization, into the village, you know, I'm only communicating with everybody via email. And I don't know, I had like about 60 or 80 people on my distribution list. I hear from two or three people every now and then thanking me for something or, you know, nice comments, but still, where are all the other people? I don't know if they're dead or alive. I hate to say that. But anyway, so I was thinking about sending out one. I did send out one over the weekend. But it was an announcement about a fire safety presentation we're having tomorrow at the Willow Manor Senior Apartment Building. And I said, please let me know if you're well and if you are interested in doing having an in-person meeting, because we don't have Zoom, all right? And I'm hoping that we can get that because we just got a nice donation from a sorority. So I only heard from one person, and she said that so far, she said that she was not interested in doing in person because she hadn't gotten all of her boosters and she'd gotten very sick. There's something in the Moderna vaccine that she's allergic to. So she will not be coming out anytime soon, but she wants me to keep me on her email, on my email distribution list. So that's good. But
Well,
too
good,
many
you've
other
gotten some good ideas here. And I wanted to tell both you and Kate, you know, look at the samples that are going to be available. You don't have to start from scratch. I mean, yes, you can get your 3 or 4 members together, but you know, you can take a look at what some of the samples are. I know we're running just a little bit late. Again, I want to be sure and ask people to send me copies of your surveys, of your reports or anything so that I can add them to our resources. I will ask if there's one burning question or comment that anyone wants to make before I make some final wrap-up comments. Yes, go ahead, Cheryl.
When the pandemic started, we had all of our events in person. We went on a challenge or issued a challenge to our members to say, we're going to train you to use Zoom. And we got everybody pretty much up and running. There's maybe 10 people in the village that are not electronically connected in any way, but the majority, and we kept holding these classes to get them up to speed on how to use Zoom. And it really helped us a lot to just keep us together. You know, I mean, most of our offerings, I mean, yeah, we, instead of having, say, lunch together, we had virtual lunches. We had dinners together for a while. We had virtual dinners, and we did movies, and we did presentations on various foreign languages, and, you know, developed other programs. And our survey said, and I'm sure, I think someone else said it as well, that most of our members want to keep a hybrid because there may be times when, you know, the weather's bad and we don't, you know, want to get out the door for a meeting, so we could keep Zoom. Also, some of our members are, you know, 80 and above. We have one dear lady who's around 98, give or take, and another one around 96, talk about the kids of the bunch. And, you know, we want to keep everybody engaged. So, you know, we went on a technology campaign to keep everybody engaged. And we still do technology training every so often for various things like your smartphone and all of that. But, you know, trying to keep people interested because we have a lot that are still fearful of coming out because of the virus. So, yeah.
Maybe I'll give the last word to Jim. Any final comments from you?
Yeah, we were talking about frequency. Based on my experience so far, I'd say for us about every 3 years, because it takes time for us to put it together and to do it well. And then you're asking your members to take their time. And I don't think you want to go back too frequently. So for me, it seems like maybe every 3 would work for us. But the last thing is you should see my email in the chat. And if you just send me an email, and Mary Jo, I'll send it to you right away. It'll be in 2 parts, 2 attachments. One is the actual questionnaire that we used last fall, the questions. And then the second one will be the results of the questionnaire, plus our team's recommendations to our board will be in there as well. So just send me an email and say you'd like to have the survey, and I'll forward those attachments to you.
Excellent. Okay, well, I will say we've gone a little bit over, and I do appreciate all the input from those who have done it and those who haven't yet done it. And please watch your email because, you know, on June 11th, we have one of these types of sessions on how to initiate and lead an interest group discussion, a discussion group on end-of-life issues. A lot of people are very interested in that and just don't know how to talk about it or who to, and Bethesda Metro Village has a very successful group going. And of course, our quarterly meeting will be in July, and you can hear from the winners of our awards. And so we'll try and keep in touch with you. Watch for our emails. And thank you all. And thank you, Jim, very, very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Well,
Yes.
Yes, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you all.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.